Welcome to Zoe Stories. They force me to dress like a girl for a secret mission. Ethan Matthews, a 25-year-old graphic designer from Chicago, always considered himself a straightforward guy. His life was routine, work by day, video games, and casual nights out with friends by evening. Ethan wasn't one for surprises or wild adventures, content in his predictable, yet comfortable existence. However, that all changed the day his old friend Max, who he hadn't seen in years, sent him a peculiar message. Max, once the daring one who lived life on the edge, now sent Ethan an unexpected proposal, a high-profile mission that would require him to dress and present as a woman. The opportunity seemed both absurd and thrilling, an odd request from someone who had always admired Ethan's reserved, no-nonsense approach. But Max, with his usual persuasive flair, convinced Ethan it could be life-changing. The event was a masquerade ball for a charity gala, and Max promised that Ethan's involvement would offer immense personal and professional rewards. At first, Ethan thought it was a joke. Yet, the more he mulled over the idea, the more the allure of stepping into a new identity pulled at him. What if he could blend into a world he'd never known? What if this experiment would challenge him in ways he hadn't even considered? The stakes were high, not just for the event itself, but for Ethan's sense of self. If he took the plunge, there was no turning back. His life could either change forever, or he would be left wondering what could have been. Ethan sat back in his chair, staring at the glowing screen in front of him. Max's message blinked, taunting him with its absurdity. "Help me out with this masquerade ball. I need you to dress as a woman for the night. Trust me, you'll never forget it." He reread it twice, hoping it would make more sense the second time, but it didn't. His mind raced. A woman? Ethan couldn't even remember the last time he'd worn something more formal than a button-up shirt and jeans. The idea of donning an entire feminine persona for a high-profile event made his stomach tighten. He wasn't sure what he feared more, the thought of stepping into heels and a dress, or the idea of people, friends, strangers, seeing him in a way he wasn't sure he could be. He had always prided himself on his straight-laced, predictable life. This was beyond anything he'd ever imagined. But the more he thought about it, the more enticing it seemed. His routine life had become a blur of monotony, and he couldn't help but wonder what it would feel like to break free from it. Max, the friend who had once dragged him into wild schemes and adventurous nights, was now asking him for something even more daring. There was something thrilling about the idea of slipping into a new identity, something that appealed to Ethan's repressed sense of adventure. Could it really be that simple: a night, a costume, and a chance to be someone else? Yet the doubt lingered. What if I fail? Ethan couldn't ignore the sinking feeling that gnawed at him. Would he be able to pull it off? Would people see right through him? Or worse, would they judge him for taking this leap? There was a terrifying uncertainty in the thought of being exposed, of revealing a side of himself he had never shared with anyone. And yet, the prospect of stepping outside his comfort zone, of breaking the chains of his predictability, whispered with a kind of hope he hadn't felt in years. What if I could actually do this? His hands shook slightly as he typed a response, not entirely sure whether he was making a huge mistake or setting the stage for something that could change his life forever. Ethan paced back and forth in his small apartment, his mind a whirlpool of conflicting thoughts. He had spent the last hour staring at the text Max had sent, debating whether to hit send on his response. His phone buzzed again, but it wasn't from Max this time. It was a message from his sister, Lily. "You've been quiet lately. Everything okay?" Ethan paused, fingers hovering over the keyboard. How could he explain the absurdity of what was on his mind? Lily was the type of person who saw through his carefully constructed walls. She was warm, open, everything he wasn't. He couldn't risk her laughing at him, couldn't bear the thought of her judging him. Still, something in his chest tightened as he typed back. "Just thinking about something weird. Max wants me to dress as a woman for a ball. It sounds stupid, right?" There was a long pause before Lily's response pinged back. "Honestly, it sounds like a challenge. But if it makes you nervous, maybe it's worth considering." Ethan blinked, staring at the message. The last thing he expected was for Lily to be so supportive. What was wrong with me? He wondered. Why am I scared of doing something that could actually be fun? Still, the fear clawed at him. What if he made a fool of himself? Max's idea was reckless, but Lily's response only seemed to add fuel to the fire. Maybe this could be the adventure he never knew he needed. He could already picture the way his friends would react. Some would laugh, others might just not get it. And Max? He would probably expect Ethan to pull it off flawlessly. A sudden knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Ethan's? It was Jake, his longtime friend and roommate. You good? You've been off all day. Ethan froze.
Jake.
The one person who would never let him live something like this down. He swallowed, glancing at the door. Yeah, just thinking about something. His voice was shaky, and he immediately regretted it. Jake raised an eyebrow as he stepped inside. Is this about that stupid costume idea Max pitched you? You know that's a joke, right? Ethan bit his lip, torn between the desire to share his turmoil and the urge to keep his thoughts to himself. Maybe. I don't know. Jake threw himself onto the couch, eyes narrowing with concern. You don't have to do it, man. If you're uncomfortable, just tell Max no. This whole thing's ridiculous. But Ethan couldn't shake the pull of something deeper, an itch that couldn't be scratched by any of Jake's logic. Something was calling to him. A voice in his mind whispered, do it. Push past the fear. Yeah, but what if it's not about the costume? Ethan muttered under his breath, though he wasn't sure if he even believed it. Jake didn't hear him, too caught up in the practicalities of the situation. Listen, don't get too worked up over this. It's not worth ruining your week. What if you just told him you're not doing it? Ethan nodded, but inside, the seed of doubt had already been planted. He could already hear Max's disappointed voice echoing in his head.
You're too scared to even try.
Just as he thought about responding, his phone lit up again. This time, a picture from Max, a snapshot of a dazzling gown on a mannequin with a caption, "It's waiting for you, buddy. Are you in?" The moment lingered, the weight of the decision pressing in like an iron bar across his chest. Ethan's heart raced as he typed a response. Could he really do this? Or was it a mistake that would haunt him forever? His finger hovered over the send button. But just as his phone buzzed again, another message came in. This time, it was a calendar reminder from his work, team meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. Don't forget. The clash between his professional life and the chaos of the masquerade hung heavy in the air. The room felt suddenly too small. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the next move. What would he do? What would it mean if he didn't do it? Ethan stared at the flashing cursor on his screen, the words "Are you in?" echoing in his mind like a challenge. His heart pounded in his chest as the weight of the moment settled in. This wasn't just about a costume or a ridiculous dare. It was about stepping into the unknown, confronting his fears, and maybe even redefining what he thought he was capable of. He looked at the picture Max had sent. Gorgeous, extravagant, the kind of dress that belonged in a movie. But his thoughts were swirling, pulling him in opposite directions. On one hand, the idea of saying yes felt exhilarating, like an opportunity to break free from his routine, to prove to himself he could take a risk without fearing the judgment of others. On the other hand, the fear of embarrassment gnawed at him. What if he made a fool of himself? What if he was just too unconvincing, too awkward to pull it off? His phone buzzed again and a message from Jake appeared. Seriously, you don't have to do this. Think about it. You'll just look dumb. Ethan's jaw clenched. His friend didn't get it. This wasn't about looking dumb. It was about whether or not he had the courage to step outside his comfort zone, to challenge everything he had ever known about himself. He felt a mix of anger, frustration, and hope bubbling inside him. The consequences were clear. If he said no, life would go on, but he would always wonder what if? What if this was the moment that could change everything? With a shaky breath, Ethan made his decision. His finger hovered over the screen for a moment longer. Then he pressed send. I'm in. And just like that, the journey began. Ethan's heart raced as he stood in front of the mirror, his reflection barely recognizable. The soft, floral scent of the perfume he'd spritzed earlier lingered in the air, mixing with the faint chemical tang of the makeup remover from the night before. He had never imagined himself here, not like this, standing in his room in a pink dress that flowed around his legs and a pair of heels that felt foreign yet somehow empowering. Max had been insistent, guiding him through each step, applying foundation, eyeshadow, lipstick. "It's all about blending, Ethan. Trust me," Max had said as he carefully shaded Ethan's cheekbones, making them more defined. Ethan winced at the tug of the brush on his skin, but there was a sense of surrender in the process. With each stroke, each layer, a new version of himself was emerging. The dress clung to his body, accentuating curves he never realized could exist. Ethan ran his hands over his hips, the fabric feeling silky against his skin, and it hit him. His body was changing before his eyes, not just physically, but in a way that felt almost spiritual. The unfamiliar weight of the heels caused him to wobble slightly, and he instinctively reached for the chair to steady himself. His reflection grinned back at him, nervous, unsure, but somehow intrigued. As the transformation continued, his mind wrestled with the sensation of being someone else. He had always been the guy who laughed off dressing up, the one who joked about girly things. Now, standing in front of the mirror, those old defenses felt hollow. The confidence he had expected to feel with the new look was slow to come, replaced by a rush of anxiety. What if they laugh? What if I look ridiculous? His hands trembled, and for a moment, he felt a surge of doubt flood through him. He reached up to adjust his hair, only to be met by the smooth curls Max had styled so carefully, the softness of them oddly comforting. When Max finally stepped back and gave a nod of approval, Ethan's stomach twisted. He barely recognized the girl in the mirror. She looked confident, feminine, bold, but that wasn't him, was it?
His mouth went dry.
He wasn't ready for this. The air around him seemed thick with tension, every minute detail of his appearance now amplified. The smoothness of his legs, the curve of his waist. He was no longer the boy who had entered the room. Max caught his gaze in the mirror. "How do you feel?" he asked, his voice soft but charged with meaning. Ethan swallowed hard. The question hung in the air, heavy with an answer he wasn't sure he was ready to give. I feel different," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Max grinned.
"Exactly.
This is you now. Own it." For the first time, Ethan didn't feel quite so sure of himself. But in that uncertainty, something else stirred, an unfamiliar sense of possibility. Could this new version of him be someone he could grow into? Maybe this could be who I'm meant to be. The evening had arrived faster than Ethan had expected. The party was in full swing when he stepped into the room, the world around him suddenly overwhelming. Music pulsed through the air, and the murmur of conversations buzzed in the background. Ethan, now dressed head to toe in a sleek, red cocktail dress, stood in the doorway frozen. The room seemed to tilt as his mind struggled to catch up with the reality of what he had done. This wasn't just a dare anymore. This was him now. He felt a surge of panic, his heartbeat thundering in his chest. Max had assured him it would be fine, that he'd blend in with everyone else, but as Ethan surveyed the crowd, he realized how different he felt. The looks he received were a mix of admiration and curiosity. A few of the girls gave him approving nods, their eyes lingering a little too long. A group of his friends caught sight of him, their laughter suddenly fading. Ethan felt the weight of their stares. Were they judging me? He tried to smile, but the tension was suffocating. He didn't know how to act, how to be the person everyone expected him to be. The dress, the makeup, it was supposed to feel freeing, but now it felt like a cage. The beauty he had tried so hard to embrace now seemed like a mask he couldn't remove. His breath came in shallow bursts as he made his way across the room, each step more hesitant than the last. Max, ever the supportive presence, caught up with him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You're doing great. Just remember, be yourself. They're here to see you." Ethan's breath hitched. Be yourself? He wasn't sure who that was anymore. And then, in a moment of clarity, it hit him. He had been so consumed by fear of rejection, of ridicule, that he had forgotten why he was here in the first place. This wasn't about fitting into some box or meeting expectations. It was about owning who he was becoming. The realization flooded him with a quiet confidence. He straightened his back, smiled genuinely for the first time that night, and walked toward the group of friends. As he approached, a few hesitant glances turned into smiles, and laughter followed. Ethan felt the shift, the weight lifting off his shoulders. For the first time, he wasn't pretending to be someone else. He was letting himself be seen. As the night drew to a close, Ethan stood outside the venue, the cool air brushing against his skin. The chaos of the party seemed a distant memory now, replaced with a calm clarity. He felt different, not just from the physical changes, but from the shift inside him. He had walked in unsure, afraid of being exposed, but now, as he stood alone in the quiet, there was a sense of peace in his heart. Through the laughter and moments of discomfort, he had learned something vital about himself. He had spent so much of his life adhering to others' expectations, never fully embracing the parts of him that felt different. Tonight, he realized that being true to himself wasn't about fitting into anyone else's mold. It was about owning his choices and his identity, no matter how unfamiliar it felt at first. He could wear this dress, carry this confidence, and still be himself. Max's words echoed in his mind. Be yourself. It wasn't just an empty platitude. It was a call to action. A reminder that the only validation he needed was his own. The evening had been a mix of vulnerability and triumph, and in the end, it was exactly what he needed to understand that his journey was only just beginning. As he headed home, his heart light with the weight of newfound self-acceptance, he couldn't help but wonder about the future. What other layers of himself would he uncover? And what other challenges lay ahead? The possibilities felt endless, and for the first time, he was excited to explore them, on his own terms. Thank you for joining us on another captivating journey through Zoe's stories. Remember to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a tale. Until next time, keep exploring, keep imagining, and keep believing in the magic of storytelling. See you in the next chapter.